Rainey is a woman on a mission to spread the word that Louisville is downtown strong. The executive director of the Louisville Downtown Partnership is with us this morning. Now, Rebecca, what was the purpose of creating the Downtown Strong campaign, and how do you hope that it's used?
Our purpose was really to realign people's expectations of what downtown is and where downtown is right now. There are a lot of absolute misperceptions about downtown right now, and downtown is clean. Downtown is safe and downtown is welcoming. So we really wanted to have a campaign. We worked with a lot of partners on it that was a simple message that just tried to convey that we believe in downtown, and so should the entire community.
Now, the last time you were on Great Day Live, we talked about the state of downtown in general. What about, though, Rebecca, people who had planned to reside there or people who are looking to reside there now?
Well, we were very, very lucky in that going into the pandemic, we had a lot of new and exciting product coming online, product that really can serve anyone. So either in the central business district or immediately adjacent, we not only have the housing you would sort of think of as typical. A lot of people have stereotypes that it's for young people or millennials, but we see everyone living downtown. Empty nesters, we see families, we see a real mix of people. It's a very diverse community, which I think is a very positive thing. And even throughout the pandemic and this very tumultuous year, we've had some new projects that have been announced, and that's been very exciting.
I love the Starks project, the Starks building. I mean, especially now we talk with lots of different guests over the past several months, and people are looking at how do I want to live? What are the changes that I want to make? And to have a collective, especially you offer something for people, I mean, millennials, professionals, families, empty nesters, like you said, but also, I mean, to attract the local artist community. That's exciting.
It's very exciting, and the building itself is such a treasure. So to have that building reimagined in such a creative way is very, very exciting. And we're expecting that project to be very successful. The other thing about living downtown for everyone is that I think we've certainly seen this in this time of the pandemic that it's closer to things. A lot of the folks that lived downtown and worked in the medical district, they weren't facing long commutes to get home after really long days. They could be home easily. A lot of people in this work from home environment found being downtown to be very useful. And I think that that'll just continue to rise.
We look forward, Rebecca, to having you back on Great Day Live again to
Thank
learn
you.
more about the Louisville Downtown Partnership or the Downtown Strong campaign. Visit louisvilledowntown.org.